The Crooked Epic. 1. In. 1. The Inn of Maniacal Madness. 6. Alex. The Cage. 6A. 2. Alex twitched with anger throughout the night, having been thrust into a cage, and he sat alone, ripened in bitterness in the back of the warehouse. The first letter Alex had written alongside 8 sheets of paper was rolled in his pocket, and as he sat, he dreamt of the freedoms people enjoyed, his family at home and where. He remembered how he had always supported Ted's scholarly studies, admired Ted's intelligence, and had never interfered with his days dreaming of higher purpose, experimental writings, or exploratory drawing. However, respect for his creative process became mutated into an internal source of sorrow. He wished to look with Ted toward an unfulfilled future, desire uninterrupted, and hold faith in a joyous tomorrow, all no longer promised. There were times when shapes and shadows would move around the room in front of his cage. There were moments when the movements would catch his eye and he would become lost in thought about their origins. They would move too fast and disturb him while he contemplated other ideas and memories, while the speed of life's events was incongruent with the observations currently allotted from his viewpoint in the cage. He sometimes thought about his father's job, inmates at prisons and jails. He thought about the Black Mariah and the immobile people within a moving police van. When there was no movement for long periods, he would worry he'd been forgotten, abandoned to die already. The chaotic noise and abysmal sounds he heard in the dark back corner of the shop composed an outrageous symphony. Against his internal oblique rhythm, the animals roared and raised again in contrary deceptive cadences. The animals would die down for stretches of mere quarter hours at most, and only in certain portions of the room. Other areas would remain a racket almost every second and reminded him of instigators or antagonists in a schoolroom when the loud and offensive were infectious to the rest of the students. Though there were rules and restrictions, civilized etiquette for even childishly impolite and uncouth, whereas here there were none observable for mature conduct. Each section of the catastrophic cacophony played louder and louder, drowning each other in competition for dominance. The abomination of smells was foul, and the stench drove him to sleepless dementia. Practically comatose with fear, he lay on his back with his neck leaning against the cage, which was too small for him. His eyes remained open as if reviewing the recent sequences of situations which led him to this predicament. Hour after hour, he waited in the darkness, and as the night slipped by, he lost any hope. Thoughts flashed in his head concerning his own safety, and whether Ted had even permanently escaped, or if Ted had returned after Clark had disappeared in a similarly mysterious climax. His neck began to stiffen, and he felt malnourished and weak, the beginnings of getting sick. Alex straightened up and looked up at the corners of the ceiling. He could see 2 sides of the room's walls. Cages and shelving obstructed the others. The side of his cell was pushed up against the wall behind him, and the other side was only 50 feet away. Both were taller than most residential houses' ceilings, stretching 40 feet high. There were not any visible windows where he was sitting, yet as time continued into morning hours, there was a gradual lightening from the hanging fixtures inside the shop. Finally, he could see well enough to write a part of his next letter for help. He had not made it far with the composition when he began to feel sicker and needed to relieve his bowels and bladder. With nowhere to go besides in his cage, he started to consider whether he should hold himself when he heard the noises around him excessively raising decibels. Alex folded his writing promptly and looked around, expecting to notice another person's presence. The early daytime and the duties entailed in zoological maintenance were pending and overdue. If the animals were taken care of, contact with the people responsible for his captivity might become available. He idly watched as birds flew around the ceiling and walls, yet never came near him. Shelving units surrounding his cage prevented any perfectly clear visibility of the myriad species wild and tamed within the space. Yet he felt strangely comforted when he heard the whimpering of a dog or animal begging, coming from the furthest corner. To Alex, this was interpreted to mean that it would probably be a wait before he met the people or person in charge. However, laughter erupted on the side that was being tended already, sounding distinct like it was Ahmed. The whirring of gears and machines' parts buzzed around the cages and along the walls. A few strange machines were moving laterally within rows of cages, pausing at each enclosure for half a minute and turning on pivots around corners through the animal shelter. When the machine working down his side came close, Alex saw red lights shining a spectral ray, flat, oblique, opaque, raising and lowering along with 6-foot-wide spots in quick 5-second intervals. The machine shot a similarly shaped spray of ubiquitous liquid into the air, followed by 2 more noises, extended and contracting mechanical arms. He had yet to lay eyes on Ahmed or Motu, so Alex waited patiently to see what would happen next in silence. When the machine finally came within view, it rolled across the floor to Alex's cage. It was a pyramid-shaped robotic machine which lay on 4 swiveling wheels, and at the top of its pinnacle was a leveled-off small platform which held a tripod carrying a telescopic lens. On one side, however, the pyramid shape was incurvate, with 5-inch wide drawers hanging at a low height from the bottom, and an odd spherical fixture extended from the frame at a slightly higher point. The robot was controlled from a remote location and functioned from programming transmitted through radio signals, received through an array of antennae, sticking off 3 top corners. It rolled to Alex's cage and came to a stop 3 feet away, with its lens facing him. Alex's cage was metal on all sides, 1/2-inch squares comprised of thick rods much too strong to bend. The robot's lens began to shine the red lights starting along the bottom of the cage. Again, laughter erupted nearby, and Alex assumed it was still Ahmed, deriving his assumption from the exposition of his comical characteristic display at the pet shop. It took his attention away from the robot's mechanisms until he saw the other darker-skinned and short, strange man approach from around the left corner of his row behind the shelves, which shook as he passed. Behind him, Ahmed came into view, briefly observing Alex's reaction to Motu and then walking back behind the racks. Ahmed was carrying a small box with a panel configured with buttons and an inset stick in the middle of the contraption. It was a foot long and almost as wide, with an antenna extending from the end, pointing away from Ahmed. Ahmed pushed 3 buttons, and the robot immediately stopped shining the red lights and pushed out 2 trays from the drawers, which extended long ramps with conveyor belts on them. The ramps connected directly to the cage, where there were 2 slats of metal lifted by small clasps on the tips of the ramp. The ramp on the right slowly dropped an orange-colored paper-covered bowl of water in front of Alex. Ahmed laughed more from the other row. Motu approached and spoke to Alex about his physical condition in the cage. "Alexander Good, are you well this morning?" Confused, Alex responded by shaking his head no. "I haven't gone to the bathroom all night. I'm hungry." Motu frowned and turned his head to the shelving behind him, shouting, "Ahmed, fetch a bedpan." He continued to speak to Alex. "We don't want you to get too dirty before Draken returns. Draken has to finish what he started with you yesterday before your escape efforts. He will be here soon." Ahmed walked back and pushed 2 more buttons on the box in his hands, and a robot rolled backward and turned right, rolled straight past Ahmed across the nearest set of shelving units and right again away from Alex and down the next aisle. Ahmed was wearing a long trench coat and had a lever-action rifle slung over his back. He also was wearing a trilby hat covering his short, black, curly hair and horse-riding boots without stirrups. Ahmed spun around and walked over to watch the robot's movements, while Alex sat back down against the rear side of his cage. Motu disappeared too, and Alex was left alone, straining to control his nervous trembling. Alex wondered if he would make it out alive. 3 minutes later, Motu arrived again, carrying a jute matting and bedpan. He put the bedpan on the cage and stood back a few feet as Alex looked up. Next, Motu pulled out a Magnum revolver and a key from underneath his white lab coat and scrubs, and held the pistol close to the cage's bar while he reached up to a set of locks with the key. Motu's hair was tied underneath the takia, and he was wearing a surgical mask and smock underneath his corpulent-sized coat. The gun he had taken out was held in a belt holster, which became visible as he reached up to the locks around the cage. Alex had not seen any of these locks as they were built in with the cage's top, 2-inch thick metal edge. There were 3 locks along the top. Alex saw now, and 3 along each vertical side, all of which took the same key. As Motu reached the second lock, turned his key, and unlocked it. When he had only the 1 on the top remaining and 2 on the left side atop the cage opened, he stretched out the top left corner and slid the bedpan into the slit. After it fell in front of Alex and rattled around the floor, Motu relocked each lock. He threw the matting over the top and adjusted it to let it hang off the side of the floor, providing cover on the part of the cage. Almost half an hour later, Ahmed returned with Motu and carried a tray with a napkin over it, which Alex hoped would contain his food. Motu manually opened the slatted sheet of metal on Alex's left, and Ahmed took the napkin and quickly pushed it into the hole. Alex did not pounce at any opportunity to attack Ahmed's hand. Instead, he feasted his eye on the turkey drumstick and bread bun sitting on the tray and waited for them to be pushed through and dropped onto the napkin. 2 hours. The Pharaoh is finishing the reassignment of the committee. Enjoy your last meal. Ahmed swung his rifle under his armpit and tapped Alex's cage with the barrel, and the 2 men walked away behind the shelving.